Welcome back with another episode of Conversations and Connections, the official podcast of the Family Crisis Center of East Texas. I'm Stuart Burson, the Prevention Coordinator for the agency. With me, someone who's been on the show before, Tonja Akridge, who's a licensed social worker with, for the Lufkin Independent School District. And kind of wanted to bring Tonja back to talk a little bit more about the topic of teen dating violence and teen relationships and things like that. Tonja, you're such a good sport. Thanks for coming and doing this again.
Thank you for asking me.
So, I guess as a social worker for the schools, I guess really my first question is going to be, do you see teen dating violence as a pressing issue right now within the teen population?
You know, just in my opinion, yes, I think it is. It's always something that we need to educate our youth on, and especially the behaviors that we see as red flags that teens may often ignore, such as teasing, making fun. You know, those things that may lead up to violence when they become more, I guess, violating.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you talk about like teasing and things like that? Do you think if someone's apt to commit teen dating violence, and I don't know, you can tell me, does it start more innocently with teasing and stuff like that at an early age, do you think? Or is it just kind of harmless when it's at an early age? You know,
I think, fun playing teasing, what I always say is when you're joking with someone or teasing with someone, if the other person isn't laughing, it's not, funny. It's not fun. And I think what it is it's a way we need to teach our children how to behave, how to respect other people's barriers, and the things that we're doing that may be bothering someone, how to stop that.
Yeah.
And when that doesn't stop, I think that can lead to more, things that offend people and lead to a poor relationship.
Sure. Well, what do you think are some effective ways to combat teen dating violence? I know that may be kind of a broad question, but if you see teen dating violence happening, what can we do as parents or even as a community to kind of fight this?
Well, one thing I think, and it's easy to say, hard to do, I think parents need to try to keep communication open with their teens. And I know that's a loaded statement. But if you see behaviors that may be abusive tendencies with your teenager, such as anger management issues, lack of impulse control, or bullying behaviors maybe, we need to work to help our teens develop skills that will prevent them from being an abuser. And discussing with your children what a healthy relationship looks like is important. We not always, as parents, are not always in a healthy relationship.
Right.
And that happens. We don't need to beat ourselves up for that. But when a parent sees a relationship beginning to cause concern, we don't need to hesitate to address it with a teen. And I know this is hard, as I mentioned before, but especially when the teen may be trying to hide something or be afraid of a punishment. Mm-hmm. We need to make them realize it's not their fault when they're the one being taken advantage of. We need to ask the teens, how their dating relationship's going. Like, how did your date go last night? What all did you do? What did he do? What did she do? What fun things are they doing? And oftentimes I think that helps the teenager reflect on the relationship and what did happen that date, and maybe what was and wasn't accurate, or what was and wasn't appropriate. Asking them those questions, and always remind them of their value, how much they're loved.
Right.
I think that's so important, especially in those teenage years, because sometimes, they don't feel very loved, and a lot of things that's going on in their life. They're in a lot of state of confusion with the hormones and behaviors that are changing.
Yeah.
And try to discuss with them before they start the dating relationship. I think this is so important. The limits they want to set. Before they even get into meet someone even. What limits are we going to set? What do you think is things you might want to do on a date and things you might not want to do? And how they can stay safe. I think that's important. Back in our day, or my day, it was basically keep a quarter in your pocket in case you need to use a payphone. And so I think it's very important to help children know how to escape, or how to get away, or how to get out of an awkward situation. And then always the parents can communicate with the school counselors also. If they have a concern, not sure what's going on, those counselors are there to guide them, direct them to someone else if needed, and also to be another set of eyes to check on their child. And one thing I do love, and I know teenagers don't, is those tracking devices on phones.
Right.
Yeah, those are really great devices. And we need to assure our teenagers it's not just to keep track of them and be nosy, but it's to help keep them safe.
Yeah.
You know, I think another component is the teenagers themselves. You know, before they decide to date someone, they need to ask around about the person, what their personality's like. Date them in groups. Don't go off to yourself with them. And as in teenage years, they need to be with groups. They need to see interactions and see how that date acts around other people.
Right.
And honestly, I think, in my opinion, it seems to always be that 6-month window is the honeymoon period, where we're all trying to act our best, you know, and put on a different kind of a facade that may not always be our personality.
Yeah.
So don't ignore those red flags, such as moments of jealousy, obsessive behaviors, such as wanting them to communicate with them all the time, not wanting them to be with their friends, being clingy. And of course, as I mentioned before, those abusive things that could be hurtful things, like attacking their personal characteristics when they're talking, making fun of them, and of course, the physical roughness.
Yeah.
You know, we all, East Texas, we're kind of rough people. We kind of pat each other on the back and give big hugs and things like that. But to be aware of those things that make us feel uncomfortable and don't ignore them.
Yeah. You know, I think maybe, and I know not all parents are like this, but I think for some parents, talking to your kids about what you want to do on a date, what are your boundaries, what are your limits, might kind of be a hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and for the teen also, you know, might be kind of embarrassing to talk about that kind of stuff like that with your parent. But I think it's just so important. You just got to suck it up and have these conversations.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people too, you know, this has rarely happened to me, but every now and then I'll get a parent that will call, hey, I'm concerned about what you're going to be talking about our kids about. And I've had, you know, at least one parent come back and say, well, I think that kind of stuff should be discussed at home. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. If it is discussed at home.
Exactly.
And I think in a lot of households, unfortunately, that does not happen.
No. And the thing we need to remember as parents is, even though the teenager we think is not listening to us, they're going to remember things we say.
Yes.
And they're going to pull it up from memory when things do come up.
Right.
And so even though we may think it's not sticking, it really is.
Well, and that's one thing I've had to train myself to think about when I do presentations. Mm-hmm. You know, you see the kid in the corner with their head down or staring off. And, you know, a lot of times at first, at least, your reaction is to, hey, you know, you need to pay attention. Mm-hmm. But you don't know what that kid is really taking in. They may be taking in every word you're saying.
Exactly.
And you they just may not exhibit that on the outside.
You're right.
You know. So I don't know, and this may be a matter of opinion. I think about when I was a teen, and which was, I'll say it, in the 80s, okay? Are kids growing up too fast today? I think they're growing up, I think kids know more today than I knew at their age back in the day. But do you think is that just a product of society? Do you think kids are growing up maybe a little faster than they should? Or is that just the way things are today and it's just going to kind of keep increasing as time goes on?
Well, in my opinion, I think they are. And I think a lot of it, you know, social media is a positive thing in a lot of aspects. But I think because of social media, they are not experiencing the natural life lessons that we experienced growing up as a child. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like they miss that childhood stage. And they're being exposed to social media that's beyond their childhood years. And so they're missing those social skills that we got when we hung out on the neighborhood streets and rode bicycles as teenagers and just hung out in each other's backyards.
Right.
You know, just talking or just playing as children would play. And they're missing that.
Yeah, yeah. as a working in the schools, when you see incidents of teen dating violence, is there anything that you would call the most common type, or what do you see mostly when we're talking about teen dating violence?
Me specifically, I don't deal directly with a lot of the teen dating violence. I may see it through my counselors, but in just interactions with our students, I think one of the main things that is often overlooked, and statistically, I don't know what the state in itself says is the most common, but I see a lot that's overlooked, such as the joking, the psychological, the verbal, emotional abuse, because it's least reported. They're not going to report that because they're going to think, oh, it's just me. I'm being sensitive. I'm being moody. I'm being, it's not anything they're doing. In reality, it is a red flag, and it's not nice. We don't need to treat each other that way in a dating relationship. And I would think that would be the most common type, even though it may not be even reported or, mentioned to a superior or a counselor or a parent.
Yeah. Do you think teen dating violence incidents are growing, or have they grown over the years? I've heard this question being posed just by sexual assault, domestic violence, period, not specifically just teen dating violence. Is it being reported? Have incidents always remained the same, and it's just things are just being reported more? People are more aware of it, or do you think incidents of relationship violence is increasing?
I think it's both. I think, once again, the social media is a positive thing in the sense that, I think it does give avenues for people to educate teenagers and parents on the signs. And so it's reported more. But in the same sense, I think maybe it is happening more because of that also. Because I'm dating someone, let's say, and they tend to be abusive. And then I'm on Snapchat and they see that. Or I'm texting someone and they look at my phone and it's right there in their face. There's so many more avenues to allow someone that tends to be agitated and abusive to escalate. And I think that social media is just, so the tracking device, which is a positive thing, but in the hands, teenagers constantly share locations.
You're right.
In the hands of someone that doesn't want you to be around your friends, that wants to know where you're at all the time, in the same sense that could cause that violence to escalate and become abusive.
Right. I know you kind of touched on this earlier, but, the last question I had for you is, what can parents do to educate kids on healthy relationships? If you was to say, just the most important things that parents can do, what would that be?
Starting early, way before the teenage years, creating that bond, making your relationship comfortable. As we mentioned before, things that are hard to talk about now in teenage years. Mm-hmm. If you would start talking about that early on, then when you get those teenage years, it's not quite as awkward.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned also before, when you start planting those seeds and thoughts and you start teaching them early on, they're going to retain that. It may not seem like it, but I think they are. And of course, the modeling. Even if you're in a relationship that's not a good relationship, let the child know, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Our bodies are not for hitting. That's what I try to teach the kids. Our bodies are just not for hitting. And I think teach them those little tidbits. Try to set boundaries about dating early before they ever get the dating age. What age am I going to let them start dating? And what does that mean? Does that mean that you're only going to get to go somewhere when I go with you? Decide early ahead of time. Don't wait till those teenage years where there's going to be a lot of hormones going on and they're not want to listen.
Right.
And then teach them, remind them what relationships that are good are. They're trusting, they have honest and kindness. There's no jealousy or possessiveness, belittling, disrespect. You got to set priorities. As I mentioned before, what will you and will you not allow in someone that you want to date as a teenager? And don't deviate from that. And when those things start surfacing that you don't like, make a decision with your teen to make them commit to leaving that relationship, but also remember that teenager needs that support of you and other adults, having other adults in their life. Like if you have a daughter, have other females that they can go to and trust.
Yeah. Okay, great. Tonja, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking this time. I know you've got a busy schedule, with the things you do at the schools and everything. And I was very happy you were able to carve out some time to talk with me.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you. Again, so that's Tonja Akridge, licensed social worker for the Lufkin ISD. If you feel like you need the services of the Family Crisis Center, I do want to remind you of our toll-free crisis number. That's 1-800-828-7233. Also, be sure to subscribe via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or the podcast service of your choice. Subscribe to Conversations and Connections. And if you'd like to donate, go to our website, FamilyCrisisCenterofEastTexas.com. There at the bottom left, you'll see a donate button. Click on that if you'd like to make a monetary donation to help survivors of relationship violence. Be the voice, if not for you, for someone else.